everyone, welcome to another Blitz review from the Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please remember to leave a like and a comment and talk about this game. I'd like to hear your opinions on the video and this game in question. And of course, don't forget that there's a Patreon campaign running if you want to support that channel a little bit further to keep it going. So today I'm talking very briefly about Dune House Secrets, which is the next in a spin-off line of games for the detective series by Portal Games, designed by Ignacy Trzewiczek. Now, I can't go into too much detail in this game because obviously I want to avoid spoilers. I mean, come on, it's a story-based game, I can't tell you everything that's going to go on, but you know I like Detective. Detective's on my shelf right down there. I liked Vienna Connection when it came out, although I did emphasize that as much as Vienna Connection was a good, solid story, it is more of an experience than it is a game, whereas Detective is kind of a bit of both. You get the experience, you get the story, but it's also got the deduction element. You've got to figure out the clues, you've got to succeed in the mission. With Vienna Connection, you didn't need to. So Dune House Secrets is another one of those storytelling games in the detective line where you have the website which has resources on it, but essentially you are playing through a prologue and 3 chapter missions as one of 4 potential characters set in the Dune universe based on the new movie. Now, I'm not going to let this affect my enjoyment of this game, but I didn't like the new Dune movie. You motherfucker! Yeah, alright, calm down. I mean, I wasn't a fan of Blade Runner 2049 either. The guy who directed it does everything so slow. I want things to get on and on, get on with the plot. I make this enough of a joke in my top 10s and my top 100. I like films to do it as well, and it just drags out while not explaining enough of the Dune lore for me as a complete casual Dune noob, and that is something you also have to bear in mind. I know nothing really about the Dune lore, apart from snippets that friends have told me during games, what I've played in Dune Imperium. I've played the Dune 6-player game, the one from the reprint one that Gale Force 9 did. I'm interested to see what they produce at the end of the year for their smaller version, but again, this is basically my introduction of Dune. The movie, which I wasn't a big fan of, and snippets from other people. So no, I'm not an aficionado with Arrakis and all the different houses and why this person's important or anything like that. So I'm coming into this as a pretty casual noob. But this can be played solo or 1 to 4 players, and each one of you takes one of these characters. Those that you're not using will be flipped over to an alternate side that just basically gives you tokens. Much like in Detective, like I say, the tokens are used for each player. So one will use subterfuge tokens, one has spice, one has military, and you use these tokens to progress through the card deck, which has your story that you'll progress through. Like I said, it is basically the detective system. You've got the website that you'll log into, which basically has a resource of little mini videos that tell you various plot points, a bit of the Dune lore, as well as little snippets like notes and excerpts and logbooks, etc. But the website doesn't have as much on it as other detective lines do. If you imagine that the original detective game had a ton of stuff that you did, all the mugshots, all the fingerprints, all those recordings and that, and then Vienna Connection had a few things on it, this has probably the least of all of them. It's literally just a resource website for a few little mini videos and notes. You could have almost had all of it in cards, although we'll get onto more of that a bit later. And so what happens is, let's say I'm doing the prologue, so I take all the prologue cards, which is a very small amount of cards, but it is only the prologue after all. It's meant to sort of teach you how the game works, and you take your mission sheet, which will read a bit of a story on there. So you read your double-sided story, it has a setup, and then you start off thinking, alright, well, which way am I going to go? I'm in the settlement. Should I go over to this house? Should I go talk to this person? Shall I do whatever? You pick a card, you read the text, you might have to spend tokens to flip the text over, flip the card over so you can read more text, but essentially you are going through the story. And again, I'm not going to spoil the story. You're playing side characters on Arrakis set, I believe, bear in mind I'm a noob, in a time after the dates of the original Dune movie. So if you imagine that the Dune movie is kind of, this is the starting thing, this is played at some point in the aftermath. So the fact that it's even got these famous characters on there is a little bit of a kind of misleading, really. But for me, who doesn't know the Dune lore, you could have made it at any point during the Dune, I wouldn't have been any the wiser. But you'll play through the cards, and then eventually on a track, which is effectively tracking your time, you'll get to a point where you've played enough encounter cards, basically 1 time for every encounter card, and then you've got to give a status report where you have basically one thing to report to the opposing, to your leader essentially, as what do you advise we do for the next mission? I think we should keep an eye on this person, and then it goes to success, or well, to be fair, I'm not entirely certain you can fail a mission. I pretty much think you succeed regardless. It's just basically an input that you put into it that has a very minor effect, if anything, on the next mission. But you put it in and you get on with the next mission. So that's essentially very similar to what you probably expected out of things like Vienna Connection and Detective. But this is a game that I think has been marketed in the wrong way, because, how do I put this? I find it difficult to recommend this game, but not for the reasons of it being bad. The story itself is fine. I'm a Dune noob, but I'm going through the story, I'm reading what's going on, I'm reading the text, and I'm getting into it. So theme-wise, I'm enjoying the story part of it. But this is being marketed as a big bucks game, £30 to £35 to buy. This is all the components in this entire box. Yes, I know you've got the website, but the website has very little on it to justify the extra price point. When you consider how much is on the Detective one, this Dune one is very small. And this is all you get in the box. A few tracks, a few sheets for prologue, a map of a settlement, a map of Arrakis, which is literally just there to lay out some context, and a sticker sheet with some abilities that you put onto your character cards when they gain experience between different stories. But all the skills do is just get you more tokens, basically, of whatever you're good at. So, my one character here, a smuggler, gets me water tokens. Well, if I give her survivor, I get another water token. If I give her a different one, I get even more water tokens. It's purely the tokens. There's a couple on here with slightly different abilities, but nothing major. And honestly, I wouldn't even stick this on your stuff. You could pretty much just write it down somewhere, and therefore you don't have to destroy the game after you've played it once. But that's literally all there is. The card deck, a few tokens, which are kind of superfluous, or could have been smaller, to be honest. I mean, these are pretty decent tokens, I'll give them that, but kind of redundant after a while. Some very basic character boards, and a few little prologue sheets in the rulebook, all of which are kind of inflated size-wise, and they didn't need to be. This is what I mean about the game being marketed wrong, because this doesn't feel like a big bucks story-based game. This is more of a novellar Dune experience. You're going through a decent story, and like I say, I give applaud to the effort that has been gone into the writing of this story. There's a decent amount of text, there's a decent amount of story here, and if you're a fan of the Dune universe, you'll get some pretty good enjoyment out of this. And I enjoyed the story fine, much like I do with the other detective stuff in the Vienna Connection, but it's over really quick. I mean, I got this game done in 2 hours, 2 and a bit hours, the entire game, right? Now, I played solo. If you play this with more players, and I know Inasti wants you to play with more players, then the game will go on longer because you'll do a few discussions and that. But there's no challenge or game present to say pass or fail a mission. You don't have anything to really deduce, apart from some very basic information at the end of a scenario, which I'm not even convinced has any effect on the next scenario. You're basically just reading out cards and spending tokens. The fact that each of you has a character doesn't really mean a lot, because other than the blurb on there, you don't really feel like this character. If I'm playing a Fremen informant, I feel no different to if I was simply playing the Atreides soldier. It's just, I have yellow tokens, this one has red. But when you play solo, you have access to all of them anyway, so what does it matter? So this is incredibly short, like the shortest experience I've ever had. At least Vienna Connection still gave me a good 90 minutes per scenario that I did, so that still gave me a decent amount of playing length. Here, I've already done everything there is in the box, and so I've got to wait for another chapter to come out with another big box. Not sure that's really going to hold fire with a lot of people. What this really should have been, and I've got the perfect example here. This is Petty Officers. This is the new signature series detective spin-off case, right? I'm actually looking forward to doing this. I'm more looking forward to this, to be honest. But this is a small box because you've already got the website infrastructure. Granted, the base set already has the tokens and the boards you need, but this is basically just an add-on. This is what this should have been. It's basically a novella for Dune choose your own adventure, you go through the story, you enjoy it, but there's no challenge, there's no objective, there's no reason for other players to even be there because you're just reading to each other. It's not like you've got to really discuss much with the other teammates. It's not like oh, I'm glad you're here because you can do this that I couldn't. It's like, nope, you're just here listening to me talk. If you remember a game that Fantasy Flight did called Legends of Dragonholt, same issue with that. You basically just sat around and listened to each other read. Same thing with this. So I can't see why you would play this with more than solo, frankly. This really does feel like a solo experience. But if you were to basically say, right, these maps, this track, a time track with a consequence track, you don't really need it. It's not really necessary. These tokens could be smaller. You don't need sticker sheets because you could just write it down somewhere. The rulebook could just be a PDF on the website. All of these could just be PDFs on the website. You know, access map of Telgazer, access prologue description, access Arrakis map. All of this could have been on the website. So all you would need is a few little cards, these asset cards, which again are just little pictures and little story elements, not particularly interesting, but make these tokens small, this tiny deck, and then this deck of cards, right? Deck of cards, that's all you need, nothing else. You could maybe do like a little foldable thing of this, you know, so rather than it being one sheet, you could just fold it in half and make them. You could fit all of that in a box this big. Price it at about £15 and perfect. This would be something I could go out and say, yeah, you know what, go. If you're into Dune, go grab this, £15, nice and cheap, doesn't take up space on your shelf, and great, you have a nice, cool little choose your own adventure story that's not like win or lose, but it's just, I want to get invested in the Dune universe and just enjoy a cool story. This is the way I think it should have been done. This, though, isn't. I mean, look at this box. This box has nothing in it. Yeah, well, but you know, don't get smart with me. But the idea is that this is basically one giant plastic insert, right, with a few cubby holes that hold literally deck of cards, tokens, small deck of cards, and this bit on top. It's wasted space. This doesn't need to go on my shelf and take up the same amount of room as something like Detective, Robinson Crusoe, First Martians, or Predator even, you know. This, granted, you might be able to get spin-offs later and then add them to this box, but I don't see why you would need that box in a sense if you just release the game in this small format. Because imagine how many of these I could slot on the Calyx shelf. I could have a whole bookcase full of these things. And granted, they'd probably be just play once and done with it, but this is a play once and be done with it thing, so why not? And then you could sell it on to somebody else if you really wanted, or pass it on to your best mate and say, look, I had a fun time with this story. How about you give it a try? So it's kind of a weird one, this. It's a lot of this stuff is superfluous. There's no challenge in it, so I wouldn't call it a game per se. But I'm not saying that this is a bad experience. It's just a little bit disappointing on the basis that you get this box, you see the cool cover, you've heard the hype with the big movie, and you think, right, let's delve into this like really gritty story. And it's a half-decent story. It's not the best one, I'm saying. I think there was better stuff in Detective, and I think overall I enjoyed the Vienna Connection story more than this one, but it's still fine. And granted, maybe some of that is because I'm not a big Dune fan. I don't hate Dune, apart from the new movie, but, you know, the actual universe of Dune, I think the universe of Dune's interesting enough. I just wish the movie actually explained it a bit better. But I'm going to get so much flack for that. But, you know, with this, I just feel like I don't know how I can recommend it for like £35 for a big box. This really should have just been a tiny little box like this. That's exactly what it should have been. But if you are a big Dune fan and you really want to just experience a cool little story in that kind of detective line by yourself, I don't recommend this for groups. I think this is much more suited to a solo play, honestly. But again, that's a lot of money. A lot of money for a solo adventure that takes you no more than 2 to 3 hours and is kind of done until they expect you to buy another set. If money is coming out of your ears, then fair enough. Maybe you might want to wait for this to come down on sale or borrow it from someone else maybe, and then you can get into it and enjoy yourself for 3 hours. But yeah, it's kind of a bit of a... It's a little bit misleading, so don't go into this thinking it's a massive game challenge adventure like the original Detective. I still think that if you're going to get into this lineup, get Detective. particularly Season 0 or Season 1, whatever it's called. I think that's a great entry point. But the detective line of games I love. I've been giving that 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10s. You know, really enjoy the detective stuff because not only is it a really good story, but it justifies the price for what's on the website, and it's a deduction game, meaning you have to actually think about what's going on and figure something out in order to actually win. Here, you just get a victory point track at the end of the 3rd chapter, which means nothing because what does it matter whether I got 4 victory points, 8 victory points, or 1 victory point? It's not like I actually fail the game. And it's not like you're going to play through it another time to try and beat your score because you know the story. There's not a lot of cards for each section. I mean, I gave you the prologue one, but let me just show you the... Here you go. This is chapter 1. Not a lot of cards there. You can see it against my black thing, but yeah, there's not a lot of cards there. You'll read most of this in one playthrough. I can't see you coming back to this for subsequent playthroughs. Overall, I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. It's an average game. I think it is definitely too overpriced for what it is, and I do think that there's just like a lot of wasted space and potential here. But that's not to say that I didn't enjoy the story aspect of it. The experience itself, i.e. just going through a Dune story, was fine. I enjoyed that aspect of it, like I do a lot of these story-driven games. And this is coming from a Dune noob. So if you're into Dune, you'll probably get more out of this because a lot more of it will make sense. Although, to be fair, I don't think you have to watch the movie to play this game, although it probably couldn't hurt just to have a bit of basic background, because when it starts throwing in the names of the houses and various characters, it's like, who? Yeah, might want to get a little bit of background knowledge. But yeah, I was kind of expecting a sort of a bit more depth to this, and instead I got a short experience which didn't take up a lot of my time, but then isn't really going to bring me back for a second play either. So that's it for me on this one. If you like what you see, then please remember to leave a like and a comment on the video, because I'd like to hear your thoughts as to what you think of this game, what you think of Dune, how much are you going to hate me for hating on the Dune movie. I know that's going to get me more flack. I'm going to get more flack in the comments about that than I am about the game itself. I guarantee you, because there's a lot of people who love that movie. It just didn't work for me, you know. But enough of that, it's time to move on. So I'll see you next time. If you want to check out more content, then you can check out the continuation of my top 100, which is now in my 20 to 11 section, like the creme de la creme games now. Oh, we're getting into some good stuff. But instead, you could also check out a video I have done showcasing Chaos Order, a new Kickstarter that is currently running from Garphill Games. Take care, and remember, as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.